What is up, everybody? This is the Sharp Angles podcast. This is the Sunday recap edition of the Sharp Angles podcast, reacting to week 7 of the NFL season. Had some interesting games, had some games that maybe were less exciting than we expected them to be, but still overall a pretty fun week 7. Thankfully, finally a light injury week for week 7. So I've been enjoying that as well. Here to recap with me, as they are every week, is Curtis Hirsch and Tucker Bagley. Let's get started here with Curtis. You have mea culpa. You have some crow to eat to Jonathan Gannon after he is finally he unleashed Amare DiMercado. So you have to tell him how much you love him now.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely owe him an apology. I wrote some harsh words to him in the waiver wire column during the week. Just didn't
Can confirm.
understand.
Can confirm.
Didn't understand any reason why the Arizona Cardinals would sign a 29. But I actually had the wrong Williams. It was Damian Williams. He's in his 30s. Why you'd sign a running back in your 30s off the street and play him in games when you're really just trying to make pastime by? That's all they're doing. And yeah, I trusted he would do the right thing. I know he's in a few of my lineups today. He didn't really break off any good plays, but he put up some points. So yeah. Sorry, man. You did the right thing today. Thank you.
He did. He had 13 carries for 58 yards, 4 catches, 17 yards. Actually, against Seattle's defense, 13 for 58, 4.5 yards per carry. That's actually pretty good. So hopefully we're going to see more of DiMercado moving forward. And Tucker, this is the last week we're going to get to talk to each other on civil terms. It looks like my Astros. We'll see after this is over. We're recording this right after the games on Sunday, so it is 7:30 Eastern time. We do this every Sunday, by the way. So you can go over to our YouTube channel, search Warren Sharp, subscribe, and you'll get it. And so it's before the Astros play in Game 6. The Phillies still have some work to do as well, but it looks like we might be headed on a Phillies-Astros collision course, which means are we even able to do the show next week? Like, what do we do? Will we just not? We'll have to go through Curtis. Curtis will be the intermediary. We won't speak to each other. How are we going to handle this?
I think I'll address everything to Curtis, and Curtis can relay the message.
Slight problem. I'm at an outdoor hockey game. We have a big NHL game outdoors next week, so I might have to tune in from there to watch you guys come to blows or something like that.
It's just gonna be a death match. I mean, it's fine. I mean, the Astros already won one. You know, if we gift one to y'all, I'm not gonna really be that
I mean, I'd
upset about
appreciate it. If that's gonna happen, then let's make it happen. That'll be a load of stress off my mind. But sure, if that's gonna happen, we can both
the
do our
rematch.
own separate pods in the same stream. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that would be great. We'll just talk to camera, straight to camera. No interaction. I'll be for that. It was an interesting week, y'all, but I think we have to get started with the Ravens because the offense finally clicked. I've said, I think 2 or 3 times on this reaction show, I've said it felt like the Ravens offense was sleepwalking through this game. It was definitely true in the Colts game, and that Colts lost. It was kind of true a little bit last week in London in the game they still won, but it felt like they should have maybe done a little bit more with that game. That was not the case today. They absolutely routed the Detroit Lions, a Detroit Lions team that had been playing very well. They beat them 38-6. Lamar Jackson was amazing. He was 21 of 27 for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns, plus 9 for 36-1 on the ground. The offense it clicked. It was good. And if this is what we're going to see kind of moving forward, Curtis, like this team is going to be a problem for the rest of the AFC if this is what the offense is going to be moving forward.
Yeah, get your Lamar Jackson MVP bets in before those odds change as well. Like, it's been a weird start to the season. They started with absolutely everybody on the injured reserve, and the defense has actually held their own, which is kind of crazy. Like Mike McDonald, he's gonna get a head coaching job somewhere next year. You just have to assume that. And once this offense, Zay Flowers, what a revelation, man. He's a fun player to watch. And today they found Mark Andrews. They hooked up again, and there was no crazy drops by the offense today. There was that one game where they dropped how many balls in the end zone? So yeah,
7, something like that. Yeah.
Of course, they're in the AFC, so there's about 8 other really good teams, and when you go over to the NFC, there's 2.5. So the AFC playoffs is going to be fun to watch because all times there's going to be good teams playing.
You mentioned the defense. They sacked Goff 5 times. They held him to 5.4 yards per attempt, which was actually their season average heading into the game, which was tied for first with the Browns. So they're going to be in first place by themselves after this game. They're also top 10 in pressure rate. They had an easy schedule. They had been getting lucky facing backup quarterbacks, and so we didn't know how real this was. But now that they've done it against the Lions, Tucker, it feels like this defense has kind of proven, all right, this defense is real. And then the offense did it. I mean, that's a good combo. Good offense, good defense. That's that's all right to
You
have.
win a lot of football games if you have both good
Yeah,
offense and good
turns
defense. I
out.
almost feel bad for the defense a little bit because I think the story the next couple days is going to be what a revelation that offense was. And it kind of reminded me of the beginning of Lamar's MVP, where he just went, absolute bananas the first couple games and run, oh my God, look at this. And I felt that way watching that. Like, finally, this is what we sort of expected from this team, from Lamar Jackson, a former MVP, from a weapons core full of guys who, have big playability. And Zay Flowers showed up again. Mark Andrews got a couple touchdowns, and it finally made sense. There was space for the players to operate down the field. Lamar Jackson looked comfortable behind an offensive line that's finally healthy and blocking well. And in a division that I think for weeks we've been kind of talking about, someone needs to just kind of take it. It's been begging to be taken over as all four teams have, stumbled over various weeks. I think this was a huge statement for the Ravens to go out and beat a team who I don't know if people thought the Lions were the best team in the NFC, but there were kind of whispers that I think if they had won convincingly today and maybe the Eagles lose tonight or the 49ers struggle tomorrow, the story this week is, hey, Detroit is on top. Detroit has a shot to be the 1 seed in the NFC. And with what the Ravens did today, I don't think we're going to be hearing that for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, and I still think Detroit is good. I had actually moved them up in the top 5 in the power rankings. They're obviously going to fall back now after this game. This game got away from them, 38-6. They're not that much worse than the Ravens, but it still was a bad loss. And then you look at their other wins. They beat the Bucks, they beat the Panthers, the Falcons, the Packers. They obviously have a very good win in week 1 against the Chiefs. But other than that Chiefs game, they lost to the Seahawks, they lost to the Ravens. I mean, there is kind of a like question of what if they played, but then you look at their schedule moving forward, and I mean they get the Raiders, they have the Chargers, they have the Bears, Packers, Saints, Bears, Broncos, Vikings. Like
Yeah,
they have a very easy schedule coming up. So I'm not. The Lions are going to win this division. I feel very confident in that, and they're going to be just fine. But it was a very very strong game. I'm more coming out of this excited about the Raiders than I am disappointed in the Lions. Would I probably be the way I go with this. We actually have a question here in the chat from Chaka. Need 16 points. Long shot, but should I start KJ Osborne or Jeff Wilson in PPR? Do you have any thoughts on that, Curtis? I agree that it's a long shot either way. And I think
I
I
don't
have
know.
a lean. Do you have
I'm
any
leaning
thoughts on it?
Osborne. I think he can get in the end zone. Jeff Wilson's behind Raheem Mostert. And then you've got the Philly run D that doesn't really give up any yards. So I'm taking my chances with Osborne. He seems to find the end zone quite frequently, especially now that Jefferson's out. Worth a dart there.
I actually think I go the other way. I think you're right. Like if he needed 6 points, I'm doing Osborne for sure. I think that you you might want to be attached to the better offense given the score that you need out of either of these players. Because I don't think either of them is getting it. I think you have probably lost this week, would be my overall opinion. But I think I take the upside shot on being attached to the Dolphins offense. Maybe Jeff Wilson can get 2 short touchdowns. Maybe he's going to take back over that role. That would probably be the way that I would go. By the way, if you're playing Showdown tonight, Jeff Wilson is $200 at DraftKings, I'm pretty sure, in the Showdown slate. So yeah, do that information whatever you'd like to do with it. We're gonna get more into week 6. Before we do that, though, let me remind you all about the content we're gonna have. Excuse me, into week 7, right? Let me remind you about the content we're gonna have ahead of week 8. Rich Rebar every single week writes a comprehensive preview of every single game. We call it the worksheet. We have no buys this week, so there's going to be a full slate of worksheets for you this week. That's available as part of the all access package. Warren Sharp's betting recommendations are available. Curtis's waiver ads are available in the all access package. So go and check that out. You can use the code ANGLES, and that will get you 15% off. It actually might even get you 25% off. So go and check it out. Put in Angles, see how much it'll get you off. We'll find out kind of moving forward. But go and check that out for sure. All right, let's move on to some injuries. There weren't really a ton of injuries. I do think, Tucker, we need to talk about the Bijan Robinson situation because he wasn't getting any touches during the first half, and we were a little bit confused. And then out of halftime, Arthur Smith comes out and says that he's not feeling very well. It comes out after the game that he had been dealing with a headache situation, which big saying, buddy, I have a headache right now. I don't know what's happening with the weather, but my head is angry. And so yeah, so he wasn't feeling great. It's, I don't think it matters much moving forward. I will say that his usage had already been decreasing. And so that made me really worried. But now that I found out it's a headache, I'm not that worried about it. But I mean, it's something at least to mention and monitor. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's just something to keep an eye on. Like if it is just a headache or flu-like symptoms, whatever it may be. But it was weird because he wasn't on the injury report. He was active. I think he had 6 snaps in the first half and didn't even have a touch. I mean, he was a distant third. And when you don't have updates like that, and you have a guy who was the eighth overall pick in the most recent draft, it certainly is head scratching. But yeah, I think it's something where I would be surprised if he's on the injury report on Wednesday this upcoming week. I think he'll be back on Sunday and all be fine. But it's just another wrinkle to the dark hole or black hole that is Atlanta Falcons fantasy players. Because once again, Tyler Algier. I mean, the offense still runs through Tyler Algier, even though you have, Kyle Pitts had an unbelievable catch today. He only got 4 targets. Drake London had 54 yards. Cordell Patterson got 10 rushes, which I think are more than he had the entire season coming into today. It's just weird. Like what Arthur Smith is doing. I mean, they won again. Wasn't a awe-inspiring performance by the offense. Desmond Ritter, I thought, managed the game well, but for the most part, it was a really weird performance by them, but they just seem to do that every week. I feel like we're a broken record every week talking about how's this team with so many blue chip talents on the offensive side of the ball. How are they running through Tyler Algier? And they did it again.
So I mean, last week or 2 weeks ago, Desmond Ritter had, I mean, probably his best game as a pro, and we gave him his flowers. And then last week it was right back to being terrible. We're like, okay, are we right back into this? And then this week, like you said, he was fine, 19 to 25, 250 yards, had a rushing touchdown. By the way, they've gotten him involved around the goal line in the running game. He had a touchdown. His rushing touchdown this game looked very similar to one from earlier in the year. I think it was the one against the Packers from earlier in the year. And so they've been getting him involved there. And I like that. I think that they maybe should keep trying to do that with him. They're also asking him to throw the ball down the field. His average depth of target's been over 8 for like each of the last 3 games. And so they're asking him to push the ball. They're asking him to get involved. They're trying to open up this offense. It hasn't worked great, but they won, Curtis. And I think that they're in first place. If I'm remembering correctly, they're in first place alone in their division. So here we are. We back the team
Doesn't
of sharp
matter.
football. We back in on the Falcons.
Nah, it doesn't matter. I can't be in on the Falcons anymore. Like we have multiple gambling websites. We have DFS. They sponsor this league. Could Art Smith not have mentioned this to somebody this morning? Like this is paying for part of your salary. That is why the revenue in this league is so high. And you didn't have the decency to tell anyone. I didn't draft a lot of Bijan because I'm not here for the Art Smith experience, but just out of common courtesy, hey, he's not feeling well. His workload might be lighter today. Just that would have helped out a lot. And you should expect that from in this league right now with the amount of sponsors that are involved with the league that pay attention to these types of things. And then yeah, they won. He doesn't trust his team to go ahead and get the lead early. He just wants to keep it a 1-score game and try to win it at the end with his ground game. And they won. That's how the Falcons play football. And yeah, they're going to win that division if Derek Carr remains Derek Carr. I don't think the Saints can get there. So the Falcons have enough really good pieces that they can just win these games, and their schedule allows them to do it. So yeah, I think they're going to win.
I said something kind of quasi-negative about Derek Carr on the Thursday episode with Rich, and now you have. And I'm no longer blocked by him on Twitter, and I worry that we're headed right back to block zone from Derek Carr. I do want to mention, first of all, on the headache with Bijan, I guess we do need to look at it. I meant to mention this. Just maybe is that concussion symptoms? That would be the one thing I'd be worried about on this, but it could just be, a headache. People get headaches. It is what it is. I do want to mention on the Bucks, it is wild how bad they are at running the football. I don't know how they're this bad at running the football. And it's obviously Rashad White was there last year, but Leonard Fournette couldn't run last year. Keyshawn Vaughn had 4 carries for 7 yards in this game. Sean Tucker's tried at various points in the season. He can't run the football. They cannot run the football, and it is wild for one team to be that consistently inept at running the ball, and that means a lot's going to fall on Baker Mayfield. And I mean, he had a decent game. He had 275 yards, touchdown, and then an interception that essentially ended the game late. But yeah, that they have to figure out how they're going to run the ball because
Yeah, I think
it's
Baker
2
Mayfield
years
is
running now.
yeah, I think Baker Mayfield is one of the unheralded stories that is flying under the radar. I went to
He's
look it
playing
up
well.
here this afternoon. His
Yeah.
third down stats are incredible. This team should not be in a single game because they just continue to put themselves way behind the 8 ball. And yeah, what if they average per run today? I think Rashad White was like 1 yard per run or something like that. He had a single digit success rate today. Single digit success rate. And they continue to do it. They ran the ball 20 times. Just pass the ball. Get Rashad White out in open space if you have to, because this is now 2 years, 5 different running backs that they've tried to carry the ball with. There's clearly some sort of blocking issue. The offensive line, stop trying to run the ball and maybe develop a pass happier game script. And Baker Mayfield, I didn't think highly of Baker Mayfield coming into the season, but he's actually played really good and bailed them out of a lot of trouble this year.
Yeah, and the thing about Baker was, I know last week he had been playing above his head under pressure, which is not something he's ever been good at in the NFL. It kind of came back a little bit to earth last week. I'm interested to see the pressure stats. Obviously, right after the games, we don't have access to that kind of more advanced data, and so I'll be interested to see his pressure. But just watching this game, I thought that he was fine again this week. You mentioned the stats. They had 20 rushes for 73 yards, 3.7 yards per attempt. 32 of those yards were from Baker Mayfield on 3 carries, and so the running backs averaged 2.6 and 1.8 yards per carry. So yeah, doing great. Keep that up, Bucks. It's really going well. Let's move on to Deshaun Watson, who had a very bad day, I think was what you would say about Deshaun Watson's day. He went out, he started the game with his shoulder injury, could do absolutely nothing. It was just awful. He was 1 for 5 for 5 yards and an interception. He goes down, he gets checked for a concussion. He's cleared from that concussion, but he never returned. I think he never returned because it became clear that he was not going to be effective with that shoulder injury. And Tucker, to me, that says that we're going to get a couple more games here of PJ Walker, because he was that bad with that shoulder injury, trying to play through that shoulder injury in this game.
Yeah, and all PJ Walker does is win, right? If you don't look at the box score or the tape and just look at the final score, all you know is that PJ Walker came in and saved their bacon again. Shout out to, my fellow Temple graduate. But yeah, it was a weird situation. And Kevin Stefanski came out after the game and said it was my decision. I chose to hold him out because I didn't want to, put the franchise quarterback at risk. But he was clearly ineffective before that head injury, before he got hit. You mentioned he was 1 for 5 with an interception. And I mean, just as a whole, big picture moving forward, if you're the Browns, if you're a Browns fan, kind of where do you go from here? Because the clock is kind of ticking on whether or not we expect Deshaun Watson to turn back into the guy we saw in Houston 3 years ago. And if you're Kevin Stefanski, you're coaching to win football games. You're not coaching to make sure the guy making $250 million is happy. So I just wonder what they do with him, because obviously I don't think PJ Walker has played well enough to keep this job long term. He's a career backup for a reason. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was even worse in his one start. And there's a reason why they're elevating PJ Walker from the practice squad for these games. So Deshaun Watson doesn't really have any competition. When he's healthy, he's going to play. But this is a Browns team that I think aspires to make the postseason. If not this year, then maybe next year. And yeah, if you're Kevin Stefanski and your job is on the line based on wins and losses, I don't know how much longer you can stick with a guy who doesn't give you the ability to win football games.
The thing about Watson is this year they actually have a reasonable cap hit for him. His cap hit this year is $19 million. Next year it jumps up to $64 million, and it stays there for the next 3 seasons. He's basically untradeable with his contract. They could try to kick more money down the road with a restructure. Um, but
But
I
would you
mean,
take
that's
that if
just
you're Deshaun Watson?
oh,
Right?
yeah,
If you're
because
Deshaun Watson with all
you'll
this
take
guaranteed money, you sit at home and say, "No, I'm coming to work."
well, the restructure will just give him money up front. It'll turn part of his salary into a bonus. So he'll take it.
Right.
Cash flow at the beginning. Yeah, they'll always every player will take that. But yeah, no, it's not a great situation. More issues for the Browns with Jerome Ford leaving this game. His right ankle kind of got caught under a tackler. I saw some reports that it could be a multi-week thing. It did not look like a good injury, and I saw that in the show sheet. Curtis, all you put was no with a bunch of exclamation points. So I'm guessing this is not going to be great news for you and your fantasy team.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to hear that. I'm a big Jerome Ford supporter these days, but I have enough Amari exposure, so if he could hold the fort down, hey, yeah, I was not here to see that, and I didn't like the looks of you saying it was a multi-week thing because the running backs are the offense right now, and if it's PJ Walker throwing balls, he likes to check down. It might be time to get DTR some more practice and get him working with the ones and not throw him to the wolves 10 minutes before the start because Watson words don't describe today's start, and he just looked disinterested from the beginning. And I think Stefanski knew his best chance to win the game was with Watson on the bench, and you can't say that because you have a $250 million quarterback, but he's coaching for his job. And do you want to keep, if you're Kevin Stefanski, do you want to keep that job or do you want to look elsewhere at some point? Like he's got to be thinking that at night because he's won a coach of the year. He could get hired elsewhere at some point in time. Do I want to save my job in Cleveland? And this is what I'm dealing with in that cap hit for the next 5 years. That's tough decision.
This was a really weird game. Like you said, the Browns came back and won it on a kind of last second touchdown from Kareem Hunt, who had 2 touchdowns on in the game. You mentioned it, Tucker. PJ Walker, it wasn't like he was great. He was 15 of 32 for 178 yards with an interception. He wasn't great. The defense gave up a ton of big plays. It was a wild game. I genuinely do not know how the Browns won this game, but there you go. They won it, and now they're 4-2, and here we are. I will say, I wrote off the Colts last week based on what Gardner Minshew looked like. Gardner Minshew has generally over the last 2 years been bad when teams have known that he's going to be the starter, and so last week we saw him be bad as well. He led this offense this week. They were able to score points. I still don't think Minshew has it, but the offensive system and the offensive coaching staff was able to get players open and create big play situations. And Michael Pittman and Josh Downs and Jonathan Taylor were able to take advantage of those situations. And in the division that the Colts are playing in, they can keep doing that. They have a chance. But this was a tough loss for them. And honestly, Tucker, I have no idea how the Browns won. Like it's such a
I don't
weird game.
either. I thought they lost like 4 times. And even that final drive where they went on it and scored the game-winning field goal, I mean, there were 3 or 4 plays. I think they were in like 7 plays inside the 15-yard line, and they all stunk. They were all terrible. They got bailed out by an illegal contact penalty. I believe that was a 4th down where PJ Walker ended up fumbling, but they got the ball back and a free set of downs because of an illegal contact on the 3-yard line. And you mentioned the Colts. It's kind of interesting because I'm not a huge Gardner Minshew believer, but you kind of look at the script for today. Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss ran the ball combined 36 times. And I mean, Minshew had one big run. I think he had a 17-yard touchdown. He added another touchdown run as well. Um, I wonder if Shane Steichen, who really ran a ground heavy offense with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia with Gardner Minshew as his backup, I don't know if he's going to be running Gardner Minshew like Jalen Hurts, but I wonder if they just lean on that. I mean, you have 2 running backs right now who are playing at a pretty high level. It's nice to see Jonathan Taylor get back, and it's not pretty. It's not really effective. Analytics will tell you it doesn't work, but I think the less you ask Gardner Minshew to do, the better. And right now, you have 2 legitimate bell cow backs in your backfield. You might as well just keep going to them until it doesn't work.
Yeah, and to that point, from like a fantasy perspective, Curtis, 18 carries for Jonathan Taylor, 18 carries for Zach Moss. I I was kind of under the impression that we were nearing the end of Zach Moss as a viable fantasy starter. But if they're going to be able to stay in these types of scripts, if they're going to be willing to use both these players, we've seen Moss be used more in the passing game previously, although we saw Jonathan Taylor get 3 catches today and 4 targets. We only saw 2 targets for Zach Moss. So it'll be interesting to see how that route split was when we get with the route data. But I don't know. Maybe Moss is sticking around. Maybe we're going to be in this very this wasteland of running backs. Maybe we're going to get to keep using Moss as well as Taylor if this is how they plan to kind of run the offense.
Yeah, I just keep waiting for it to be the week where they just feature Taylor, but it hasn't happened yet, and Moss keeps collecting points on my bench. So one of these weeks I'll try to put him back in the lineup, but it's tough to trust when you have a running back you just paid all that money to have as his backup in your lineup. But he does get a lot of passes. I know last week I didn't see what he caught today, but yeah, it's tough to run 2 running backs from the same team with a lot of confidence. But I think Tucker's right. I think they're just going to try to make Gardner Minshew do as little as possible, and this is going to be a run heavy, fast paced offense. At least they play with pace too. So that's kind of the one thing about them. At least they're trying to have some fun out there and still score some points.
And like I said, they created big play situations in the for the offense. We saw a 59-yard touchdown from Josh Downs. We saw I believe a 75-yard touchdown from Michael Pittman. 75-yard touchdown from Michael Pittman. So they were able to create big plays, and that's you like to see that. We actually have a question here in the chat from Bryce. Thoughts on Amari Cooper? I'm about to give up on him. That offense is so brutal. I will agree with that, but I also will say we need to have a little bit longer memory and remember that he went for 4 for 108 and absolutely dominated the 49ers last week with equally bad quarterback play. He's going to get the targets. He still had, I believe, 8 targets today. It's off the top of my head. Let me see it. Yeah, he still had 8 targets today. I'm going to keep
the easiest wide receiver schedule moving forward. So I was kind of buying Amari Cooper going into this week, thinking the Colts were going to be his breakout game, but it didn't happen. But things should be fine. Deshaun Watson will figure this out, maybe, hopefully, like possibly.
I don't know about that. But I do think Amari Cooper is good and will get the targets. And the thing about wide receiver is, and Rich and I talk about this on the Thursday episode a lot, is wide receiver from, I don't know, let's pick a number, 13 to 30 is just a heap of people that get targets and you hope they get a touchdown. And Amari Cooper is probably going to remain in that zone lower than you would like because of the offensive situation, because of, what version of Watson will get if he plays, or PJ Walker, who it looks like is going to keep playing. Or we'll see what happens with Watson's shoulder. So I understand the trepidation with Cooper. And if you have better options, I mean, that it is what it is, but he's in that group of wide receivers that you're just hoping for the best. He's going to get a lot of targets. He is DJ Moore. He and DJ Moore are the same to me. They're going to get a lot of targets from a quarterback that you're not trusting. And you're going to have to play him because they're getting all those targets and they're pretty good. And so that's kind of the situation we're in. Got him up for a trade for CeeDee Lamb. I'm offering Cooper and Deontay. Yeah, I'd take that. If you get that trade, yeah, we'll do that. That would be a really good deal for you. All right. So I guess we have to talk about Chargers and Chiefs. Chargers, made a game of it. It looked like it was going to be a shootout early in this game, but then the scoring kind of stopped in the second half. Kansas City ends up scoring a touchdown late, the only touchdown of the second half, to take the game 31-17. I kind of thought going into this game, the Chiefs defense had been playing well. Justin Herbert had been struggling a little bit ever since Mike Williams left. I thought that we were going to see more of an under game, and it did actually go under by half a point, but not in the way that I thought it was going to be. The offenses did work early. We saw big plays early, but then in the second half, the Chargers, they couldn't get anything going. Herbert finishes with 2 interceptions. This is now a few games in a row where we haven't seen the best out of Justin Herbert. He has that finger injury on his non-throwing hand. The Chargers are 2-4. I'm worried, Tucker. I don't know if they've got enough. I don't know if they've got enough games left, winnable games left, to even get to 9 or 10 wins. And if they don't, then I mean, we're not looking at a playoff team.
No, and it's funny. They showed the AFC West standings at the end of the game. And it's funny, after the first Thursday night game, everyone's saying the Chiefs have no shot at winning the division. This is finally the year they'll take a step backwards. They're 6-1. I think they have at least a 3-game lead on everyone else in the division. They might have this wrapped up by Thanksgiving. And the first half of this game I thought was awesome. Like, for a year where we talk about not a ton of quality offensive football, felt like this was going to be, the game of the year. And finally, some really, really high quality offense. And it kind of petered out in the second half. But I mean, what Mahomes did today, and I don't think anybody's talking about Travis Kelce, the football player, enough. I mean, the guy's what, 31 years old, 32 years old, and he goes for 12 and 179. I mean, that entire offense runs through a tight end in his early 30s, and it doesn't matter. It's still the most efficient group, in the NFL outside of maybe Miami. It's crazy just how well that offense runs when those two guys are on the field. He's going to throw it to them. Their number 2 option is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. It's crazy to me. I mean, just what that offense was able to do again today, putting up 31 points. They're fun to watch in a league where I don't know there are a lot of quarterbacks playing at a high level. I don't know if there are a lot of offenses playing at a high level. Chiefs starting to deliver on a weekly basis now, which is exciting.
Yeah, Mahomes ended up with 424 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'm actually looking at the box score here. They scored 6 points in the first quarter, and then they combined for 35 points in the second quarter. Then they scored 0 points in the third quarter and 7 points in the fourth quarter.
Kelce had 30-some fantasy points in the first half, and then just kind of that's what the Chiefs are, though. They get ahead of these teams, and then they just kind of they get by. They could win every game by 30 points if pushed, I think, but they know they just once they get ahead, they just kind of make time disappear as well. So
yeah. I just wonder where the Chargers go from here, because you mentioned it's getting late for them. They're 2-3. Brandon Staley said in his post-game press conference the team needs to hit the reset button. Unfortunately for Brandon Staley, I think the reset button is no more Brandon Staley.
The reset button is you, Brandon.
He is.
You are the reset button. I don't know why you're calling for your own termination. I hadn't heard he said that. What an absurd thing to say for a coach on the hot seat. Why would you ever say that if you know that you've been on the hot seat for 17 games at this point? What a wild quote. What I will say, and I kind of wrote this in the power rankings, they get the Bears next and then the Jets. They do have the Lions, but then they get the Packers. They still have the Patriots. They still have the Broncos. They still have the Raiders. They still have the Broncos again on their schedule. There are winnable games left here for the Chargers. They've kind of had a rough go of it here at the start of the year. They could get it turned around, but I am interested to see how long Brandon Staley lasts, especially with Kellen Moore there as a kind of just like plug and play replacement to see what happens. If they lose to the Bears, I mean, that's it. That's ball game. And so it'll be interesting to kind of watch that moving forward. And you mentioned it with the Chiefs. I mean, that's kind of why I've been a little bit worried about them. They hang on against the Broncos. They hang on against the Vikings. They hang on against the Jets. But you're right. It almost feels like that Jets game was kind of a microcosm of this. It almost feels like, oh, we have to play now. And then they just drive down the field and Mahomes, slides down inside the 1 so they can get out the rest of the clock. And that's the way it goes. So maybe the Chiefs are just kind of on cruise control here. The division, as you mentioned, Tucker, the division is done. And so maybe we're going to see a lot more of this here from the Chiefs, and then, be ready for the playoffs. And I guess spend more time with Taylor Swift. How many, every time I looked up, we were looking at her in the box. How many more Taylor Swift cutaways are we going to get, NFL? Like, we get it. She's there. She's great. I don't know. Question here from Tristan: are the Bills fraud? That's the next game for us. And what I said in here, the headline that I have in here is the Bills defense is a problem. We talked about this after they lost Tre'Davious White. It got worse when they lost Matt Milano. They gave up 5.8 yards per play to the Jaguars. They gave up 4.3 yards to play to the Giants, which isn't bad, but those are the Giants that you gave up 4.3 yards per play to. Then they gave up 6.6 yards per play to the Patriots, the Mac Jones Patriots. They couldn't stop Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne. That is what they were struggling to stop. Curtis, I think it was you who said maybe last week or the week before, with this team and the window that they're in, they have to go and be aggressive to add to their defense because this defense just isn't working right now.
Yeah, I know that I had texted Rich this morning. We got to play some, like, what Patriot do you want to play? Because this defense hasn't been shown what they really truly are. They have problems there. They're missing a key player on every level. And I had thought that the Patriots could put up some points. I thought the Bills were going to win still, but I wanted to attack that game in DFS because it's just something that I wanted to be ahead of. This defense is a problem. They can't pressure the quarterback as much anymore, and then they've got no corners as well. So it's a problem. And I know Rich has been the one that kind of has said that the offense they're building for Josh Allen it doesn't make sense. You have this guy who can make plays like Patrick Mahomes, and yet you want to play him in as small a space as possible. Go get some field stretchers and let him do his thing, because you might need that now. So it's a weird situation in Buffalo. Josh
They
Allen
have
is
to open
really
up
good.
the offense. They have to move it again. Yeah, Josh Allen's good. But you mentioned the defense. Like, they gave up. So the Bills go down and they score to take a 3-point lead. And then the defense gave up 8 plays and 75 yards in a minute and 46 seconds to an offense that had been absolutely inept to this point in the season before playing the Bills. It's not good enough. And the offense, scored 25 points. That wasn't good enough, Tucker. They still have the Dolphins in this division. I know they have that win over the Dolphins, but they've lost 2 of 3 since then, and they kind of hung on against the Giants. I'm very, very worried about this team and where we're going. And I think they need to make some changes for sure on defense.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can chalk up a game like this to just a division loss, right? Like a lot of teams lose to inferior division opponents. That's what happens when you play a team twice every year. But it was weird because I thought if New England were to win this game today, Buffalo was missing both starting defensive tackles. Ed Oliver was out this week. I thought maybe New England could kind of just grind out a win, like kind of just ride Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott. And neither one of them had success. They had like 20 carries for 65 yards, something along those lines. And New England didn't even control the clock either. I think they lost the time of possession battle as well. They were able to beat them with a lot of short passing. Mac Jones completed somewhere around 80%, 85% of his passes, didn't turn the ball over, and New England just beat them. I mean, that's kind of what comes down to it. And it's tough because Buffalo is missing guys at all 3 levels. We mentioned before, you're missing Tre'Davious White, you're missing Matt Milano, you didn't have Ed Oliver today. But yeah, I mean, for a team that's kind of an older team, that might be the back half of their championship window, and you have someone like Sean McDermott who still hasn't gotten over the hump, and maybe the front office is getting a little impatient with him, even though they've had a wild amount of success by Bill standards during his tenure there. I wonder kind of how desperate this team is to be successful over the final 10 games of the season, because so far, for a team that looked like they were neck and neck with the Chiefs to be the class of the AFC, I mean, they aren't even the best team in their division right now, and I don't think anyone would argue that they're close.
But they still beat that team that they're not better,
Yeah.
probably not better than. They still smoked them, 48-20. And
Yep.
that's this season in a nutshell. That is what this season is. The Commanders, you just look at the Commanders' schedule and what they've done week to week. It's the wildest thing. They get demolished by the Bills. They go to overtime with the Eagles. They have random wins thrown in there and terrible losses. And it's been the weirdest season. It's been the oddest season. And yeah, it's just the Bills are another kind of great example of this week to week nature of the league. You mentioned short passes, and that actually clicked something in my brain. I want you all to guess what the average depth of target of Tyler Bagent was, or Tyson. Is it Tyson Bagent? I want you to ask what guess. In a game the Bears won easily, what was the average depth of target for Bagent this week?
And the Raiders actually had a chance to set themselves up to be in a playoff spot. Like, they're overachieving. Like, this season is wild.
No guesses? No guesses for what his average depth of target was?
5 yards. I'm
2.8.
going with 5. I didn't see.
Both went over, but we're not playing Price is Right rules. Tucker wins 2 yards, air yards per target was what he threw, and they were able to beat the Raiders 30-12. What a wild game! This is a very, very odd season that we found. Um, we need to move on and talk about the Giants a little bit, because Curtis has been on this for the start since like the very beginning. Ever since we knew Daniel Jones might miss some time, Curtis was like, you know what, Tyrod Taylor might just be better, and you know what, like he's kind of been better. Can they even go back to Daniel Jones? Like they're going to. Should they go back to Daniel Jones, Curtis?
I, no, absolutely not. I know. I assume the coach feels the same way, but yeah, he's the guy you paid all the money to, so he's gonna get the next start, and he's probably gonna feel some pressure to get back out there. But yeah, like I said, I really thought Tyrod could be what this offense was looking for, just because, man, Daniel Jones's awareness is awful. And they're missing in once Andrew Thomas comes back, fine. Then he can probably sit in that pocket and make a few more throws. But right now, without Andrew Thomas, you got to put Tyrod in there, who can just kind of gets out and made some passes today, unlocked Darren Waller and won the game. It wasn't all that good. They didn't put up a ton of points. It's really not what the 2023 Giants are about, but they won.
Won the game. They hung on with the Bills. And you're right. It hasn't been great. Tyrod has 2 touchdown passes through 2 games. He didn't have any against the Bills. He had 2 today, but he's had 240 yards per game throwing. Jones in 5 starts has 177 yards per game with 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Uh, it just hasn't been good. And I think that,
It's the
something they have
sacks.
to take into account.
You see it with Sam Howell. You can't be an effective offense, and Rich had always wrote that drives which take sacks are killers, and it's just those sacks that Daniel Jones continued to take. So no, is he playing a lot better? No, but he's eliminating the minus, and that's basically what you have to do right now. And because it's going to be tough to get the ball to your wide receivers with that offensive line, but just
Yeah,
eliminate
absolutely.
the sack, and Tyrod's done that, and they won a game.
There you go. They're now 2-5. So everything's going great for the 2023 Giants. Let's kind of go through a couple of these games pretty quick hit. The Seahawks beat the Cardinals. I've been mentioning this for a little bit that I think the Seahawks defense might be good. They were good again today. They held the Cardinals to 4 yards per play. The only thing that kept the Cardinals in the game were 3 Seattle turnovers, and we've kind of seen the offense be a little kind of back and forth. They didn't have DK Metcalf. I think the Seahawks are good. What do you think, Tucker?
No, I agree. I think the Seahawks are a team that, even after last year, I thought they're a little underrated, and especially with Geno Smith. It was, yeah, you did it this year, but can you do it again? And I think he's playing probably around the same level as he was a year ago. I don't think anyone's going to mistake him for an all-pro type of talent, but in a league that doesn't really have a lot of great quarterback play, and I think that's a theme that we've really seen this year, is there hasn't been a ton of great quarterbacks, even big name quarterbacks putting up big numbers. What Geno Smith has done is been more than enough to keep the Seahawks on top, to keep them, winning football games, and winning today, going to 4-2, especially in a pretty weak NFC. I think it's huge. I think the Seahawks are a team that, I don't know if anyone's going to call them Super Bowl contenders or mistake them for, favorites to play in Vegas in February, but I think they're a team that's a dark horse to at least play on Championship Sunday. Like, they could knock off the Eagles or the 49ers or the Cowboys in a division playoff game based on how well that defense is playing right now. I mean, what they do defensively, I think is fantastic. They were great again today, and obviously it's against Joshua Dobbs, but he's looked pretty competent for the most part during his time here, and
Offense has been
they held him
fine.
to 19 to 33 for 146 yards. I mean, what they did against them today, I just thought was another feather in their cap. I just think Seattle is a better team than maybe what they get credit for right now.
Yeah, and I think we'll see, with Cincinnati moving forward, that their loss last week to Cincinnati wasn't a bad one, and they held that offense down a little bit as well. And so, if the defense is playing well, and Geno didn't have a great game, but if he's going to be fine, then they're going to be okay moving forward. The Packers, the Broncos were in control of this game, and then gave up the lead to the Packers, but then they came back, ended up winning 19-17, a bad loss for the Packers, Curtis. And I mean, we were talking about it before we came on. Jordan Love is not it. Like that I believe that question has been answered, and Jordan Love is not it. It's kind of where I am.
Yeah, very very rough to see. And Aaron Jones, once they lost, the season went south once they lost Aaron Jones after he scored that big touchdown in week 1. Like, he was their whole offense in week 1, and ever since then it's just been this tire fire offense of just try to make a couple big plays here and there, and if we do, we could score some points, or we go 3 and out and kick the ball and rely on our defense. And yeah, Aaron Jones came back today, but he still didn't play a ton. And obviously it's still hampering him because he didn't practice all week, or he had some limited practices. So without him, yeah, that it's tough to see, because they have some nice young pieces. I know this season wasn't geared towards winning, but I think they should have a few more wins than they do right now. And playoffs weren't out of the question. Maybe they are. It's tough to expect them to get to the playoffs with Jordan Love the way he's playing right now. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they're not going there. What I found a stat about them that I found very interesting, which was that they've scored 26 points in the first half this year, which is dead last, and they've scored 104 points in the second half, which is second in the league. And they, for whatever reason, they do not play offense in the first half, and then in the second half, suddenly their offense is not great but fine. And I don't know if that's coaching. I don't know if Jordan Love, they're able to get him to make adjustments in the second half and things look better, because Jordan Love has, just from my eye test, played better in the second half. I didn't look up those stats. And so I don't know what's going on with this offense. You're right. Aaron Jones not being healthy hurts them quite a bit. But yeah, they've got everybody back now, and they don't have any excuses. And they just lost to the Broncos, who, by the way, for fantasy people, the Broncos defense has quietly been playing pretty good defense for a few weeks now. So that Miami game, don't let that get stuck too much in your head when you're chasing matchups. A few other quick fantasy things here. LOL, if you spend a lot of fab dollars on Zach Evans. I sorry about that. There you go. Also, so Daryl Henderson. I assume if Daryl Henderson wasn't picked up by this week by anybody in your league, I assume we're targeting him in the waiver wire, right, Curtis?
Yeah, I'll have that chat for our waiver wire piece. I was a little hot under the collar this morning because I fell for it. I fell for the rookie wish casting. It was never Zach Evans. We'd seen that through. He was number 4 and he still didn't play. Like Sean McVay clearly didn't have a lot of hope in him, because Royce Freeman played every game except this last one ahead of him. So I'm still angry at myself for that one. A little bit perturbed.
One other little fantasy note here before we start to get out of here. I want to go back to Bajan. Bajan has thrown 43 passes. 15 of those have gone to DJ Moore. Just something to throw out there for you if you want to target DJ Moore. Anybody else on the waiver wire we're paying attention to this week before we get out of here, Curtis?
Nothing huge. I guess we'll wait to see what's happened with Jerome Ford. Pierre Strong will get more action. I just don't think Kareem Hunt is ready to take over the full-time role. So Strong would give you another few touches a game. And I'm keeping my eye on Zamir White. Josh Jacobs clearly isn't performing to last year's expectations, and he's on a 1-year deal. At what time are the Raiders going to bring him back next year? Maybe Zamir White gets a little more run moving forward, because that offense is struggled in the run game this year. He did have 3 receptions today, and those downs were always played by Amir Abdullah before. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mentioned Zamir White on Thursday, more of like a wish casting. Like, hey, if this running game isn't working, maybe we try something else. All right, what are we looking forward to, Tucker? What are we looking forward to this week? Anything on the top of your mind before we get out of here?
This isn't something I'm looking forward to. I'm kind of hoping and praying maybe I'll speak it into existence. I just want more consistent quarterback play across the league. Like I think I mentioned it a few times. It just up and down the league, even like we said, the big name guys, the guys like Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. I mean, how many quarterbacks have actually lived up to maybe the standard we kind of set them at? Like Mahomes is doing Patrick Mahomes things. Tua Tagovailoa has taken a step forward. Brock Purdy, I would imagine, I think a lot of people, he's exceeded their expectations. That's about it. Like Geno Smith, I mean, for the most part, a lot of these quarterbacks have taken a step backward, or they aren't, playing well. And I think there's a big reason when we talk about the lack of, offensive football this year, the lack of scoring across the league, the lack of entertaining games. I think it starts with the quarterbacks and just how inconsistent so many of them have been.
And I've expressed this opinion. I think that the current defensive meta makes it harder on quarterbacks, and I wonder if all we're seeing is that the cracks have been papered over by offensive scheme prior to this, and this has been the level of quarterback play, and we're kind of going back to that point where there just weren't enough good quarterbacks. what I'll say is this quarterback class coming in is allegedly good. We say this every year, but the people who actually are watching it say no, but for real this year, this one's good with Drake May and Caleb Williams and Riley Leonard and people like that. And so maybe this is a blip. Maybe we're about to see the kind of quarterbacks flip. We've had a lot of retirements, of really good quarterbacks. So maybe we're going to see this flip, and next year it'll be better. But you're right, this year it just hasn't. It has not been good for quarterbacks. What about you, Curtis? What are we looking forward to?
Now, I did want to shout out today. Some of the games weren't high scoring, but the only real blowout was the Lions. So even though the games aren't as entertaining points wise, at least they were close today. Most games went down to the fourth quarter. You could have picked. You didn't know who was going to win, and the Browns won when there's no way you thought they would ever win. So shout out to today. At least it brought that. And we didn't get a lot of scoring, but at least we had some close finishes. And yeah, I look forward to tonight to see what two good teams with two good quarterbacks is going to do. This is the Sunday night game, and we're due for a good one. And I think this one will not disappoint. I think both offenses should cook tonight. But I said
I'm
that
hoping
last
so as well.
week too on one of the games, and it didn't deliver.
Yeah, no, we've had a lot of disappointments in these island games, but hopefully we're going to get another one. You mentioned it. It has been, that was the other thing that I've been, it's fine if you don't have a lot of offense, if good defense is being played, which that has not been the case this year. That is not why there hasn't been a lot of offense, or if the games are close, and that also had not been the case. And this week we at least got some close games. We got some exciting games, and so that was fun to watch for sure. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to trying to figure out which teams are good before I write the power rankings this week, because the list is dwindling of teams I feel comfortable with in the top 10. The Bills have fallen out of that list now. The Lions, are they still in there? I don't know. They're going to be in the top 10 because there's nobody else to put in there, but it's rough. It's rough. I just hope we get a good game here for the Eagles and the Dolphins, and we feel good about them. That's it for us. We'll be back next week to recap week 8 of the NFL season, a full week 8. No teams on bye in week 8. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp. You can subscribe. Make sure you go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Use the code ANGLES. You can get some money off of the all access package. Check out Curtis's waiver wire column. Check out Tucker's injury columns that he has out every single week. And we will be back to talk to you next Sunday.